All right, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to this panel today. So this is the COVID-19 Study Abroad panel featuring students who are abroad spring 2020 and fall 2020. My name is Ciani and I am the communication design intern at the GEC. And also co-hosting this event with me are the global ambassadors, Junie and Griffin, and I'll have them introduce themselves as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Griffin Barriss. I'm a senior public health and international and global studies major at Elon. I am one of the two global ambassador student coordinators. I did my fall 2019 semester abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark, and then my winter term 2019 at the Comprehensive Rural Health Project in India. But those were not during the COVID-19 pandemic. So please divert your attention to the panelists tonight who have better and more recent experiences than I do.
Hello everyone, sorry my Zoom's been really laggy, so I'm gonna hope I can get through this introduction without being frozen. But I'm Junie, I'm the other student coordinator for the Global Ambassadors. Welcome everyone to this event. I'm a senior, I'm a psych and stratcom double major, and I studied abroad fall 2019 in the Sunshine Coast, Australia. So like Griffin, I wasn't abroad during COVID, but we have many panelists here who will be talking about their experiences about going abroad and just being away during COVID and all that. So welcome, everyone.
So we have 5 panelists, and I'll ask all the panelists to say their name, their major, their program name, and the term they studied abroad.
I can go first. My name is Emily Wilbourne. I'm an arts administration major, and in fall of 2020, I was in Seoul, South Korea with Sungkyunkwan University.
Hi everyone, my name is Ali. I am a junior here. I'm an econ consulting major, and I was abroad in fall of 2020 with CIEE in Berlin, Germany.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Thibodeau. I'm a junior and I'm a poli-sci and international and global studies double major, and I studied abroad through SIT to the Rwandan Peacebuilding and Reconciliation Program.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Axness. I'm a dance performance and choreography major. I participated in DanceJerusalem and I was abroad 2020 from February until July.
I think those were all of our panelists. So to start off, for those of you who were abroad last fall or continued their program last spring, what precautions did you have to take in order to be safely accommodated in your city, whether it be sort of like pre-departure and while you were there?
I can go first. So I was abroad during the very beginning of the pandemic. So I only had a month and a half there before the restrictions took place. So we were required to quarantine for almost 2 months. And then the whole country kind of opened up, and then we were able to go back to classes in person, and masks weren't a thing after those 2 months because the entire country, like the rates of COVID went down so far that it was no longer necessary except for on public transit. And walking in buildings until you get to your classroom. And then once you got to your classroom, you could take your mask off. But another wave happened shortly after I left. So clearly that didn't work out for them.
For my experience, our program was actually shortened. So we did 6 weeks online. The CIEE does their program by blocks, so you'll have 3 blocks. So we did our first block online from the US and then went over for the last 2. And while we were over there, we got tested before we left, tested at the airport right when we got there, and then we quarantined up until we got a negative test. And then after that, it was just masks, social distancing, meeting with different households. There were a lot of restrictions there. So we just kind of, Germany progressed further with lockdowns as we were there over the fall last semester.
Yeah, when I was going to Rwanda in the fall, I had to get tested. I think it was about 2 days before I left. And then when I arrived, they shuttled us to the hotel, and then we got tested at this like government sanctioned hotel. And we stayed overnight until our test came back. We were like quarantined. And Rwanda had really strict mask rules. Every single person in the country wore one. And you had to wear it all the time, no matter what. They had very serious tracking. So like whenever you went to a restaurant, you had to sign in with your name, phone number, email, passport number, and things like that. So, you know, if anyone, even at the restaurant you were at, tested positive or had symptoms, they would call you and you would have to do all that testing. So it felt really safe, and they had just a lot of restrictions, but it also felt really normal. Kind of with everything, because then their cases were so low while I was there. So it was really nice.
My experience was really close to Mary's. I had to do mandatory quarantine. Regardless of your test result, you get tested when you arrive in Korea. You have to do a mandatory 14-day quarantine, no exceptions. And I was able to quarantine through my school. So I was just in the dorm for 14 days. And then similarly, mask wearing was pretty much universal, or totally universal, because if you didn't wear a mask, you were fined. Like in public, on public transport and private businesses, you had to sign in. And also they had a QR code tracking system. So once you got a registered like domestic number in Korea, you applied to get this QR code, and you wouldn't be let into businesses unless you scanned it. So they really had the tracking on lock, but also they really had COVID under control. So it was the trade-off.
Wow. Yeah, those are super interesting perspectives from all sorts of different areas of the world. So this is a very similar question. A lot of you kind of answered it already, but a lot of you described the quarantine processes on the way there. Would you mind describing the quarantine processes on the way back, or if you were potentially exposed while in country, or any other sort of situations related to that?
I can go first on this one. I did have to complete a 2-week quarantine due to exposure as I was over there. Our program is normally like 150 people. That's what CIEE kept telling us, and there were 9 of us over there. So we would pretty much just all stick together as a group. And one girl out of the 9 of us tested positive. I believe it was like the beginning of November. So immediately, she lost her taste and smell in the morning on a Monday, and I didn't go into my internship that day. All of our classes were immediately moved on to Zoom, and she got tested that day. And then when her test, we all stayed in quarantine until it came back positive, and then we completed the government mandated 2-week quarantine. So our program leaders were very, very good about acting quickly and making sure that we wouldn't be exposing anybody else within our area. So it was handled really well. It's kind of a bummer, but it was for the best. So.
For me, when we went in the 2-month quarantine, it was a country-wide like regulation. So they like the IDF soldiers kind of regulated it. So it was, if you were seen outside, they would ask you where your home is, and then if you're more than 100 meters from your house, you were told to go home, or you faced a fine. And in terms of like social distancing, if you were closer than 2 meters, they could fine you. And so it was very like, it was taken very seriously during those 2 months. And so I think most people follow the rules just because of the fines were so high.
Yeah, I'd say it was really interesting because they had, in Rwanda, there were a lot of police around, which wasn't a scary thing, like it may kind of is here. And it was really nice, and they would kind of like, if someone wasn't wearing a mask, they would be picked up and brought to a stadium where they would be fined and have to sleep overnight in this like soccer stadium for not wearing a mask, which I thought was hilarious. And I thought it would be funny if Elon did that and like everyone ended up in the football field for not wearing a mask. But for coming back, like you said, Griffin, it was really weird because I had to do all these tests going into Rwanda, and coming back for the US, I was checking like the Department of State stuff, and it was like, maybe wear a mask was kind of what it said. I had to do testing to leave to get on one of my flights because Qatar Airways required a negative test. But none of the American flights that I had to take required anything. They required a mask, but a lot of the other ones also required a face shield with your mask. So it was definitely weird kind of being abroad for 3.5 months where everything was so strict to coming back and it being like not really strict at all.
Yeah, again, same as Mary. Because I had to go through so much like rigmarole and paperwork to get over there, I was really anticipating some more kind of barriers coming back into the country. But I had like 3 layovers on my way home, and I could have gone anywhere. So I really didn't have to quarantine when I chose to quarantine. But like I spent 7 hours in the San Francisco airport and then went to DC and then flew to Richmond. And so didn't have to quarantine when I came back legally, but I recommend anyone who travels internationally does.
One more thing. So when I went back, it was really shocking that there was nothing I had to do to get back into the country. And I think that the most surprising thing was like how relaxed it was. And I had one more thing to say, but I'll remember it later.
We also have one more panelist who just hopped in. His name is Manny. I'll have Manny introduce himself and then also answer this question as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Sorry for hopping in late. I've been having audio issues, so I'm on my phone right now. That's why you have this disgusting angle of, I don't know, it just looks weird. But yeah, so I'm Manny. I went to Los Angeles in the spring of 2020 doing the Elon in Los Angeles program. So I did Study USA. I don't know, what are your other questions? Sorry.
The question was like, what was your quarantine process look like? I know for Study USA, it would probably be way different because I'm hearing that a lot of people, when they came to the US, like there was no quarantine process compared to other countries. So when your program ended, what did you have to do?
So we didn't really have to do anything, just because when our program ended, it was March, and it was still very early in kind of the process of like learning about COVID, or at least when we went home. So our program never actually ended, but you know, we were all kind of highly recommended to go home, considering California was in a state of lockdown. So I didn't really have much to do, especially, you know, another reason for that being California was very like ahead of the game and stuff like that. But like North Carolina, as you guys know from being in the state, is not ahead of the game. So, you know, I didn't really have much to do, but, you know, just kind of, I stayed at home, of course. But, you know, it was still, like I said, early in that process of like learning about it.
Good. Thank you all for that insight. It's very, like, very different to see what other countries are doing than what the United States is doing. The next question is, how did you safely navigate studying in a new environment?
I can go first. I'm sorry, I was reading Catherine's message in the chat. So learning in a new environment, all of my classes at SKKU were just online. So I got to know WebEx quite well, except for one dance class that I had in person on campus, which was just super distanced and only happened in person 5 times before it also went online. So the real challenge was kind of just the language barrier because my classes were not taught in English besides one. They were taught in Korean, which obviously presents a challenge as I don't speak Korean.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of the biggest, like not issue, but I guess the biggest thing was just like time zones. So when I went home, I'm from North Carolina. So I was here in North Carolina taking classes, but my classes were still on West Coast time. So I had like one class that ended at like 8 p.m., which was kind of annoying. But I would say that was kind of the biggest thing, was handling time zones while at home. But ultimately, kind of similar in terms of doing the online classes and things like that.
I'll say I had a different experience because all of my classes were actually in person. But my program was different because I wasn't on like a campus, a university campus. There were only 7 people on my program, and we just kind of stayed in this like hotel hostel thing together. And then we just go to this building that they had bought, like SIT had bought, and we just do class every day there together. And so we really just kind of stayed safe with like the first month, especially always traveling together, which was really easy since we were all living in the same place, and just kind of always making sure someone had a buddy when they were going to dinner, because people speak Kinyarwanda there, and some English. So like occasionally you could get a taxi where you could speak English, but we really had to work like the first few weeks in learning just some of the easy like right, left, go there things for the taxis, and getting really used to using Google Maps was a big thing to like help us try and navigate everything, and just learning the area was really big.
My experience was kind of like Mary's, where because my program was so small, we were able to have classes in person for the majority of the time. We would wear masks in our classes and all of our desks were spaced apart, but we were also living in the same building and taking classes in that same building. But one thing that was interesting is because they weren't able to send like all of their, or CIEE wasn't able to like hold all of their programs this year, but they still had a lot of professors from all over the world that wanted to teach their class. So I had 2 different Zoom classes, as well as 2 from the ones that I was taking while I was in the US online. So one of my classes was taught from South Africa, one of them was taught from Italy, and then there was one from London and one from Spain. And then I had 2 like classes taught by professors in person in Germany. But it was just really cool because I kind of got to get a lot more cultural information than I would have if I was just taking classes by the professors there. So it was a really cool experience that probably wouldn't have happened if not for COVID. So it's the little things.
My classes were in person for the first month and a half, and then during quarantine they all went online. And then after those 2 months, the rest of the year, my academic classes remained online, but my 11 dance classes were all in person. And it was, the online classes were so difficult because it was all in Hebrew, and all but 3 of us stayed behind during the pandemic. So it was only 3 of us that spoke English, and some of us wouldn't show up during classes. So then the teachers forgot that there were some students that only spoke English. And so especially when it comes to dance, it's hard to, like, when they give you critique, it's so hard to hear the feedback and understand it when you don't speak the language. The other difficult part was I signed up for this architecture course, and a huge component of it was going on field trips around Jerusalem. And because that was fully online, we only ended up being able to go on 1 field trip. And similarly, we were supposed to go to 10 or 12 performances during our time there, and all but 2 were canceled. So that was really sad.
Yeah, great perspectives, everyone, about just adjusting to a new life in a new country and in a new fundamental world that we all are still adjusting to in some ways. Going off of that, so more broadly, how did COVID-19 shape or impact your abroad experience, maybe compared to what you originally thought it was going to be, or compared to how you thought it was going to be in the sort of world of COVID-19?
In terms of classes, in terms of my dance classes, it really didn't affect that much other than the language barrier. They can't see me in person, not understanding. But in terms of I was planning on traveling a lot in the area while I was in Israel, but because of COVID, we were restricted to just being inside the country. And so I would not have been able to see as much of the country if COVID hadn't happened, because every weekend I would have been in a different country instead of seeing, like, I ended up during quarantine making this really long list of everything I wanted to see when everything became open. And I definitely would not have stayed every single weekend, every single break in Israel, exploring the country, meeting the people, if it wasn't for COVID. It definitely kept me in, like, oh, and then also, like, because so many people left from my program, I was in my program, one of like 3 people that spoke English. And then there were some other programs there that there were English speaking students, but for the most part, I was surrounded by people who didn't speak my language within my like apartment complex. So, and also my religion. And so I got to participate in so many other cultural and religious things. Like, I've never done Passover, and that probably would not have happened if I wasn't quarantining with like all of these different families that were Jewish. And I celebrated Shabbat every weekend. I learned, like, I did the whole thing where you don't use electronics for the weekend. And I would not have probably done that if everyone around me wasn't doing that. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree with the traveling aspect of what Catherine just said. I stayed in Berlin the entire 12 weeks. We took a few day trips out with CIEE, but we were limited other than that because we weren't allowed, like, you needed actual proof that it was for business or school or some other legitimate reason if you wanted to get a hotel or Airbnb anywhere within the country or out of the country. So I explored Berlin, and that was just a lot of fun because I probably wouldn't have gotten to know the city as well as I did. But on top of that, I think the people also really made my abroad experience, and it was such a small group, and that's always been like my favorite atmosphere. Like, I love being a part of like a smaller, tight-knit community. And that wouldn't have happened without COVID. I would have had different obstacles of having to find friends while I was over there and going through all of these things, but it was kind of set up. So one of my favorite things to say when people like ask me, they're like, oh my gosh, how was abroad like during 2020? And like, the only thing I can say is that it was such a different experience than anyone else that I've talked to about their abroad experience, but it was like so meaningful to me, and I would literally not trade it for anything.
Yeah, I feel really grateful because I feel like I was still able to do a lot of the things that I had intended to do when I chose this program and wanted to study abroad in Korea. Because luckily they had COVID so under control, I was still able to go to a lot of places. And it probably would have been different if I'd gone to a different country or region. One thing that was an issue was that many like local businesses were open, but any sort of big gathering place like concerts were obviously canceled. Temples, museums, and performances were canceled for most of the time, and then they were opening back up right as I left. So I was like, that's not fair at all. And part of the reason that I wanted to travel there is because my undergraduate research deals with Korean Buddhism, but I wasn't able to go to any Korean Buddhist temples. So fun irony, but I still had a really good time. I think it was still worth it.
Kind of going off of that, I was able to go into all these different mosques and temples and like churches while I was in Israel. And because there was no tourism in Israel at all, I had like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is like where some believe Jesus died and was resurrected. I was able to go in there with no one else in the entire space. And so it was really incredible, like being the only one in these places that are normally packed where you can't even see everything. So that was really cool.
I totally second that. That was one of the coolest parts of being abroad during COVID, was that every single site that you went to see, all of my pictures, there aren't people in them. Like, they look like professional pictures, but I took them with my phone only because there's like nobody else like with their cameras up or anything like that. Like, it was so cool.
I will say one thing. Oops, sorry, Mark. I've already spoken, but I am going to speak again. One thing that did impact my ability to go around the country or to do some things is because there was kind of a general distrust of foreigners, because Korea itself was taking COVID so seriously. There was this opinion that foreigners who were visiting we're not going to take regulations seriously. So there were some establishments where if I walked up with my big group of international friends, we'd like not be let in because they would think that we were going to be disruptive or not follow COVID protocols. So I'm sure that's not the same for every country, but it was like sort of this recurring theme.
Yeah, I'll say because my program is pretty different from everyone else's, because mine was centered around a humanitarian crisis. It was kind of a more somber tone of a program. It wasn't really and especially just the area, we couldn't really do a lot of solo trips, even without COVID. Like, that's just not really a thing. We were able to travel throughout the country, which was nice, and got to go, up Mount Kigali and some of the different lakes and stuff, which was nice. But it was really great because I was still able to do my research, and I was able to interview the people I needed to interview, which was incredible. I presented it at NCUR today, which was just crazy. And so it felt really nice to kind of be able to have done this. And that was kind of an aspect that was still included. It was really interesting because kind of like Ali said, how a lot of programs were canceled. There were only 2 people on my program, one being myself, that actually planned on going on this program. Everyone else was planning on going somewhere in Europe or something else that had more travel involved. And so a lot of people weren't necessarily prepared for the topic. Like, kind of, I've been studying the genocide for the past few years at Elon, and so that was kind of a shock for other people and what was going on, and they didn't necessarily have the maturity, I would say, to deal with that. And they kept asking us, like, when are the bars going to open? When are we doing that? And so I'm happy that I kind of was prepared for that before going to Rwanda, and also just knowing what their COVID stuff was beforehand. Like, I was kind of following them for the months leading up to it, and so I knew that bars were going to be closed, these things were going to be closed, and that this was what the program was going to be.
Awesome. Yes, Ciani, do you want to take it away with the next question?
Yes. So what was the biggest difficulty you faced while you were abroad, and how did you overcome it?
I actually got really homesick, which I know is like a very normal thing when you're abroad. But I think something about being abroad during COVID and having spent the last like I had spent so much time with my parents, like more than I'm used to. And I was so excited to get out of there and like go. But then the holidays hit and I was like, okay, it'd be kind of nice to like be home with my parents. But because we are such a small program, CIEE did like a great job of kind of like making it feel like home for the holidays. They like catered dinner for us for Thanksgiving and Christmas, which was really cool because like they were kind of like my little Berlin family. So I was able to like connect with them, have these conversations with them, and we were all super close. I lost my grandfather when I was over there right after Thanksgiving. And so just having that like core, very strong group of people behind me, backing me up, was something that I probably like wouldn't have been as successful in my abroad program without. So
I will say, I unfortunately had the opposite reaction, or not reaction, like program, because I had a small group like you did. But as I kind of said, they weren't really people who were planning on going on this program. And so we were not like a family. A lot of us did not get along well. Unfortunately, we had one person that was an anti-masker, which was interesting since we signed a legal document saying that we would wear masks. And so that was a really big issue the entire time. And everyone else on the program almost got closer because of us trying to deal with that person. But I would say that was something that really kind of let me down during my program, was that I didn't have that I didn't really have good friends while I was there, but it just really made me work hard to appreciate where I was and the program and to kind of make best of it, because I've always kind of had like a connection of people, you know, at Elon or at home and stuff. So it was really, I feel like it made me really vulnerable, and I feel like I learned a lot from that, and kind of having to be better at going to dinner by myself, going to a cafe by myself, you know, and kind of try and be more independent like that, and just, you know, depending less on like friends necessarily.
For me, I would probably say like the biggest challenge was just, like I said, because we were kind of in the like early stages of COVID, there was a lot of kind of like unknown between, you know, what was happening. But I'm very fortunate too that like my roommate from freshman year, who I've known, who I'm really close with, like he was out there with me. So like we were able to, you know, despite like not really knowing kind of what was going on or where the future would lie with COVID, you know, we were able to really, I think our relationship definitely kind of improved and definitely really, you know, expanded because we were together out there and we're both kind of feeling the same thing.
I think the most challenging part was like when COVID hit, it felt like the world was gonna end. Everyone was going home, their parents were making them come home, their institutions were making them come home. And it was a very difficult decision, what to do, whether to stay and have a bunch of new experiences and risk, like, I don't know how to navigate the Israeli health system. Like, I mean, I had the resources to be able to do that, but I was only there for a month and a week or two before everything kind of went down. So like being nervous of like, who's gonna take care of me? Everyone that I grew close to left. And one of the girls that went with me is in the dance program here, but she left. And so the only other people that were there that stayed behind are planning on living in Israel in the coming years, or planning on joining the IDF. And or they had family in the area, and so they all had these senses of like, this is still my home, I don't need to leave to go home. And a lot of people questioned my decision to stay, but I was very glad that I did. And then that kind of tied into like a culture shock of some kind, because like everyone that I knew that I like felt comfortable in the country was no longer there. So reestablishing like who do I know, who can I count on, but also because everyone was planning on staying there long term after the program had ended, it was really hard to find people to travel with me because they were content with just being in Jerusalem, being near their families. Like they knew that they would be able to see the entire country one day, whereas I don't think I will ever go back to the country, just because like this was the moment to see it. And so I had to get comfortable traveling by myself. And that was really difficult, especially when you don't speak the language, feeling comfortable, like asking very simple questions, and having people approach you when you're lost and not being scared. Because I got lost in Bethlehem, and there was a man that came up to me and I was terrified, but I found out that he knew that I was lost, and that I was by myself, and he was just trying to get me back to the main area. And so, yeah, that was definitely the most challenging part.
I know it can be kind of scary to sort of share what your biggest challenge was, but y'all are still here today, so you guys can do it. You guys came out much stronger. All right, so moving on to the next question, kind of like we just talked about difficulties and just the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just been so hard for everyone, let alone being abroad or away. How were you all sort of able to manage your mental wellness and just overall mental well-being while being abroad during all this craziness?
What I'll say is, honestly, I think my mental health improved when I went abroad because of how seriously Rwanda took the genocide. Oh my God. COVID-19. Sorry. How seriously they took COVID-19. Sorry, again, I was doing a whole presentation about the genocide today. So they took COVID-19 so seriously, and so I honestly felt so much safer than I was in the United States. Like everywhere, I live in North Carolina, and like we said, like not handling it well. So it felt so nice that like when I was going places or even just walking around, everyone was wearing a mask, you know, knowing that while I was there, they would get like 20 cases a week, like for the country. And they were testing, you know, it's not like they just didn't have the numbers. And so I honestly, my mental health just really improved while I was there. With COVID. I will say kind of with the friends thing that made me a little shaky sometimes, you know, not having a support system, but it made me closer to my friends back home because I would just kind of text them if I'm having an off day, which again was hard because of the time difference, you know, so like if I'm wanting to text in the afternoon, it's like 3 a.m. for them, so I wouldn't always get a response right away, but it really made me realize who at home was there for me and kind of going to always kind of stick by my side.
I feel the same as Mary. When I was abroad, I was having like the time of my life. It was definitely it was the best time of my life, even with like the challenges to it, because Korea was taking things seriously. It was wonderful to have distance from sort of everything tumultuous that was happening in the US. It was good to have a little bit of distance from the election drama. My international friends, like the other folks in my program, were the best people I've ever met, and we're still friends. And I'm going back to Korea this summer to continue my research, and I'll be meeting up with them again. So it more like my mental health kind of like dipped when I had to leave because I had a really wonderful time making connections there and seeing the country. Like, of course, there are highs and lows, but I just manage my mental health by like taking breaks and doing things that make me happy and not letting sort of irrelevant drama influence me too much. I just try to like step away from things.
I'd say my mental health definitely dropped when COVID happened and everyone left. It was very scary and I didn't know how to be alone. And I think that what made it better was I didn't make any really close connections after the people that I really came close to left, but I got comfortable with being by myself, which was really like, I've never had to do that before. Like when classes were on breaks for like 3 weeks because of COVID, during that time, it was like, what do I do with my time? Because every single day up to now, I've had things back to back and I've been so busy. And just what do I do now? And so what I did is every day I'd be like, okay, the sun's out there, like I'm gonna go out there and just lay in the sun. I was lucky that it was really beautiful weather while I was there, and so I'd like sit in the sun and paint and do Pilates and watch people play soccer, and then they would invite me to play soccer or volleyball, and I would meet all these international people just being out there by myself, and they were curious who I was, and so I made like some really good conversations that way. And when classes picked up again, honestly, it was so nice being back in the dance studio. The first time I was back in my Gaga class, I cried during the last 10 minutes. It was like, I'm tearing up now just thinking about the feeling, like not being having to dance in a room smaller than the room that I'm in right now. That was heartbreaking. And so going into this studio that I came to love during my first month there, having all that space to move and having that energy of people in my space, I like my mental health went right up from there. Just, it was, even though like they weren't my best friends, just having the presence of people, but then also being comfortable with being alone helped.
I definitely had like a different experience. I kind of went into abroad thinking that my mental health would be like amazing the entire time that I was there, and I would never have a hard day and it would all just be like sunshine and rainbows. There is actually no sunshine in Berlin, which really affects my mood. I am a person that like when it's sunny out, I will automatically have a good day. When it's cloudy out, I can really feel it. Like I just don't enjoy it as much. And it would get dark at like 3:30 p.m. there. And so that was kind of difficult to navigate at first. I never had been in that situation in my life where my mood was like so heavily affected by the weather, but I just felt myself being like tired all day and just not really feeling motivated to do different things. I loved our living situation, but it was all concrete and like gray. And so it was just kind of difficult to get myself out of bed some mornings, but I really just like, I would kind of bank on the fact that there were 8 other people there who would want to do something that day. And so for me, it was just all about the personal connections, the getting out and doing things, even if it was cloudy or rainy or cold or whatever, like even if it was dark, we would still go out and try to make the best of the experience and the weather. And so just like kind of pushing myself to do things was something that I learned to do when I was over there, because normally if I'm here and it's cloudy and rainy, I'll just stay in bed all day and I won't really care. But being over there, I was like, I can't do that. I'm in Germany. I need to get out and like do something. So kind of just motivating myself to like be active, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, there's definitely kind of like a fluctuation for my mental health in terms of being just when you're abroad, of course, you have your ups and you have your downs. But I would say kind of one of the bigger things that really helped me is talking to like my parents and my friends back at home, especially during COVID. I had this mindset that I was just going to go abroad and I was going to hang out with the people out in Los Angeles and meet new people and stuff like that. But I think, kind of some of the best conversations I had while I was abroad and while COVID was going on was the conversations I had with my family back in North Carolina, some of my friends back in North Carolina. So I would say that really helped me, was talking to people back home and communicating with them.
Excellent. Yeah, incredible resilience from, I know that word has been so overused, ready, resilient, resilience this, resilience that, but truly speaking, some incredible challenges, crime. That was, wow. Good job, everyone. So our final question before we open it up to the audience, if we have any, is how has your participation in a study abroad program impacted your overall college experience? And what advice would you give to students who are thinking about participating in a global engagement experience, especially now in the sort of uncertain world of COVID-19?
I would say, especially as we were just talking about mental health, I felt like everyone I talked to before going abroad was kind of like Ali was saying, like, it was the best time of my life. Like, it was all amazing. It was so amazing, so amazing. And then when I got there and I had these down days, which you have in life all the time, it was such a shock because I was like, I thought this was supposed to be like the time of my life. Why am I sad today? Why is this happening? So I'd say just like really remember that it's still life. And just because you're in another country or like you're occasionally doing fun travel, like stuff is still life, and you still have those kind of life things happen. You have down days, you have up days, it was the best time of my life. Absolutely. But, just that I like telling people, everyone I talk to, is that you're going to have a down day and I don't want it to shock you because it shocked me, and then I was like, am I doing this wrong? But I would say it definitely completely changed kind of what I want to do with my life, and really showed me how much, because I was doing research and getting to talk with people, and especially I was getting to talk with people whose perspective is rarely shared. It made me really want to kind of continue doing this and realize that I really want to be a researcher where my opinion absolutely doesn't matter. And I just want to produce research about people in the world where, you don't get to hear their story a lot, because there's just so much out there that's not written, either from, Rwandan people's perspectives, in so many different parts of the world. And I just really want to be like doing that, where it's like my perspective literally doesn't mean anything. I just want to, forward what these people are saying.
I would say for me, I definitely would say that going abroad doing the program definitely really improved and was really beneficial for my time at Elon. I think a big part of it was just kind of my confidence as well, just because I was like living in Los Angeles, one of the top like media like hubs in the world. I was interning and stuff like that. So it was a good job in terms of, it was very beneficial for me in terms of like really kind of putting into my mind that like, I can live in this city and I can kind of do these things the same way that like others are, for someone who has not been to Los Angeles prior to going out there. And I think in terms of advice, I would say like, don't take anything for granted. Don't take any day for granted. Don't take any experience for granted. It's already amazing to just have the privilege to go abroad. I know it's, a lot of Elon students do, but that's not the norm for like college students like around the country. So you already have the privilege of being able to go abroad if you choose to go. Definitely recommend, like I said, just not taking for granted, anything, any day, any trip, any experience, really treasure it because, like I said, it's not something that a lot of people get the chance to do.
I can say that my abroad experience totally augmented my whole time here at Elon. I don't know what I expected really going into it. I just thought like, oh, like, I don't know anyone who's gone to Korea. I should do that. So I don't think anyone can ever prepare you for the lessons you will learn when you go abroad. People can tell you like how to like what to pack and how to like prepare in terms of technical things, but the things that like you actually learn being on your own without an adult to help you if you need it, like you just have to figure things out by yourself. So I definitely feel so much more confident in my ability to navigate really challenging, seemingly impossible situations after my study abroad experience. And it was also wonderful. Like I feel like Emmanuel was saying, the opportunity to travel internationally is not something that everybody can get. It's like incredible that we've all had this opportunity and took advantage of it. So I think if you have the opportunity to really travel abroad, you should make the most of it and really understand that it's a great privilege, and like nothing can ever replace the things that you learn in that situation.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Emily said. It was such a shock to me how independent I thought I was, and then how independent I had to be when I was abroad. When you're in college, yeah, you don't have your parents here, but you have teachers, mentors, everybody else. You have health center if you need it, food in the dining hall. Like when I went abroad, it was so much different. I was in charge of my own transportation. I had to set up a phone plan. I had to like budget for the entire time that I was there. And it was just a lot that I hadn't really realized until I got there. And I was like, okay, I'm on my own now. So maybe preparing a little more than I did might help. But also one thing that really completed my abroad experience was just like meeting the local people. And obviously, while being COVID conscious, I think that is such an amazing thing that I was able to do. Even like the guys in the coffee shop down the street, they got to know us so well as like the group of Americans that when we had to quarantine, we went back after 2 weeks and they were like, oh my gosh, we thought you went home, like you're back. So it just kind of like completed my abroad experience, knowing that I was there being an active member of the community, or maybe not like active member of the community, but like being a part of the community, and just kind of meeting everyone and talking to them, hearing their stories was just like such a really cool part. And I recommend that everybody tries to do that if and when they are able to go abroad. So
I was planning on going to Israel since I was in the 8th grade. And so for me, this was like a capstone on my whole dance experience, because I grew up in an Israeli dance studio and I've always wanted to dance in Israel. So this is why I chose Elon to go on the specific program. So Elon wouldn't be the same if I hadn't. And so what I learned from being abroad is like, so when I was abroad, I took only dance classes other than the 2 academic classes that I was required to take. And at Elon, I had to take my schedule is mostly dance and science balanced. And so it was very nice having the opportunity to just focus on dance and refinding my passion for it. And so what I got out of it was I realized that this might be something I want to do in the future, whereas before I wasn't so sure. I thought it was the end. It was like a celebration of my career as a dancer. Advice, learn how to cook without using a microwave. I only ever heat up meals for food. And in Israel, I didn't have a microwave. Learn how to use a toaster oven. I've never used one of those before. So cooking was a challenge for me. Also, I would recommend getting some kind of book. And I know it's really touristy to get like a tourism book in your country you're going to, but going through that and making a list of everything you want to see while you're there, because time moves fast. Like if you, I did this thing where I decided that every day I'd do something new or see something new. And so being able to check off my list every single day, and it was very satisfying to see that I was making the most of my time abroad.
Wow, thank you all so much for your transparency, all the advice. This will really help students, and just like hearing all of your stories and how the challenges that you faced, like you still came out of it and made the most of your experience is really amazing. So now I'll open it up to the audience. Are there any questions that you have for our panelists? You can either say it out loud or put it in the chat.
It can be a question like, what did you eat? It could be anything.
My question for each of you is, if you were doing it all over again, what might you do differently?
I can go first with that because the end of our program, they had us do a lot of reflections. And so I think that I would try and be more independent in the beginning. And because I was just a little shy, which I think is fair. I had never been abroad before, like anywhere, have never left the East Coast. So it was definitely weird for me, kind of being in a completely new place, not even English is spoken that often. But really just kind of trying to explore more by myself, and, you know, not being like, oh, I'll just order in meals, you know, like, because they have like a Grubhub kind of thing there. I was like, no, I wish I had gone out more, you know, to dinner by myself and done that. But I was kind of nervous in the beginning, and then I got more comfortable towards the end. So I think in the future, you know, just trying to take that leap of faith further in the beginning.
You know, you wanna go? Hindsight's very, 2020 on this. But I would probably say that, like, I wish I was kind of like less cheap in a way, in terms of like, really just kind of wish I spent, I was like trying to like, save and stuff like that, but I kind of wish I bought out a little bit more in Los Angeles, just because, now we're, we got the pandemic and stuff like that. So couldn't really do much afterwards or when the pandemic hit. But prior to that, definitely kind of wish I, like I said, I went out, did a couple more things, and was like less frugal with my money, which is kind of a weird thing to say.
I really wish I had more falafel while I was there. It was so cheap, but I was so used to just like making really poor food choices in my apartment that I rarely went out to eat. And that would have been, now I miss falafel because I didn't have it enough while I was there. I also would have, before or during the Hebrew course that I took, I got a good grade in the class, but I wasn't learning it. So to apply it, I was learning it for the grade. And I wish that I absorbed the material more, and that I wasn't afraid to talk to people, because they knew I was American no matter what. My hair was dyed blonde. Everyone's a brunette there. Like, everyone knew that I was a tourist. So but it would have been nice to try to communicate earlier on, because by the end, when I was trying to do it, when I was traveling by myself, I was so uncomfortable, and sometimes when I really should have communicated, I chose not to.
I wish that I had packed better. I probably packed too many clothes, and then it made it really difficult when I was trying to come home because I did ball out a little bit too much, I would say. German fashion is just, I love it. I wear black and white all the time, so it was just perfect for me. But anyways, I ended up having to ship a bunch of stuff back, and it didn't get back until I think like late February 2021, and I sent it in November. So I wish I was a little bit more proactive with trying to figure out like how to get stuff back to the US, because it was just kind of something that I hadn't really planned for and didn't really think that I would experience. But then it was really stressful in the last like month or so that I was there.
I also would have definitely prepared differently if I knew then what I knew now. I would have learned a lot more Korean. Looking back, I feel like I'm so embarrassed at how naive I was. I kind of just showed up in the country and I expected everything to fall into place, because this was my first time leaving the country in any capacity. I just thought like, oh, this is a program that's established, so things are already planned. I don't have to really do too much work. And then I showed up at Incheon Airport and had to I was like, I have to get a bus where? And like, I looked so stupid. I absolutely would have prepared more. And when the semester progressed, I would have allocated my time a lot differently. I ended up going on a lot of random dates that took way too much time away from, I should have been focusing on my experience and not these periphery activities. So I totally would have done things differently.
Well, that's all super amazing. Thank you guys all for your transparency. That's all the time that we have for today. But I can't thank you guys enough for agreeing to be on this panel and sharing your experience. It means the world to me, and I know that your insight will definitely help others. Yeah, so thank you so much.
If any of the panelists or other participants have any other questions as well, feel free to email either Ciani or Global Ambassadors, send your questions to them and we'll reach out to the people and connect you with them if you don't have any questions right now and have questions further on. But thank you everyone for sharing your stories.
Thank you for having us.
Have an amazing night. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.